Hello, hello, and welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, my history students. We are now in the second half of 15.1 Guided Notes. The Cold War begins, and here we are going to talk about this race, this nuclear race between the United States and the Soviet Union. If you remember before, we talked about this tension that was happening between the United States and the Soviet Union, mainly because of issues of influence of government structure, whether one side wanted democracy or the other side wanted communism in those areas of Europe that was once occupied by Germany. So now there's this tension between both of them, and they're kind of pushing back on one another, right? So let's go ahead and start. So let's talk about this nuclear arms race. So as you see here, by the mid 1950s, this is the time period of my parents, y'all. Yeah. So the United States and the Soviet Union became very involved in a nuclear arms race. So if you recall back, if we mentioned it in class, World War II, like right after World War II, when the United States dropped that bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Soviet Union saw that and they were like, They started their own nuclear arms program and started tinkering with nuclear warheads as well. Okay, so now with the use of nuclear weapons, this added an increasingly frightening element to war materials, or military materials, right? And each superpower, not just Soviet Union now, there were other superpowers that were creating nuclear weapons, and now they're building deadlier bombs that are even more far-reaching than what the United States did with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Remember Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Those were in a plane, and it was dropped from the plane, the Enola Gay, right, and another plane. But in this case, now they're actually able to launch them. And as you see here in the 1950s, intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs, were established, and they can send those ICBMs, those bombs or those missiles, they can pinpoint them anywhere they like. So the United States and the Soviet Union are working diligently on both sides to create these stockpiles of these ICBMs, right? And they're creating them, and they're just having them on the side just in case anything was to pop off, right? So these stockpiles of nuclear weapons was called deterrence, okay? And think of that root word deter. To deter means to move away, or to to not acknowledge something. So they're trying to move away from having an all-out nuclear war, but on the side they're still creating and stockpiling, or having these tons or these multitudes of nuclear weapons just sitting there just in case, right? So they have these arsenals of nuclear weapons just in case they had to go to war, but they're also putting them away and letting the public, or the governments, both sides, know that, hey, we have nuclear weapons that we're stockpiling here. We ready, just in case y'all didn't know, right? So that's the kind of mentality on both sides, but they really don't want war because they saw the capacity of what could happen. So, mutually assured destruction, or MAD. As you see here, is a military strategy of deterrence. So again, that word deterrence, right? Trying to deter or to move away from war, right? And this was particular between these two superpowers of the United States and the Soviet Union during this time of the Cold War. And it was a strategy of trying to deter from war using nuclear weapons. And the idea was that both sides knew that if one was to use a nuclear attack on their side, so for example, if the United States would trigger a nuclear attack and attack the Soviet Union, they knew that the Soviet Union would come back and retaliate with a nuclear attack, and thus just obliterating both countries, right? So because they knew that in itself created this stalemate that prevented the use of nuclear weapons and prevented them from going into war, right? So that was the idea of mutually assured destruction. Okay, so that's the case. That's what it was. Mutually assured destruction. I'm mad. And as you see here, if you can explain what this particular political cartoon means in Edpuzzle or in the comments, that would be awesome. It has to do with mutually assured destruction, but go ahead and explain that in the comments or in Edpuzzle. That would be awesome. So not only were both countries engaged in a nuclear arms race, they were also engaged in the space race. So in 1957, the Soviets sent what you see here, this satellite called Sputnik 1. And this was the first human-made space satellite that was launched out in orbit to space, right? And it orbited the Earth. Now, the United States, especially the American public, because remember during World War II, a lot of propaganda was being put out, right? Propaganda was just being sent out in crazy amounts. That didn't stop, okay? So there was still more propaganda being put out there to influence the minds on both sides, right? In the United States, for citizens of the United States and for citizens of the Soviet Union. So both sides were being majorly manipulated and influenced by propaganda, okay? Now that this satellite has been put out into orbit, right, to orbit the Earth, the American public is like, what are they doing? Is this a spy camera? Are they looking at the United States? Are they trying to figure out who's then, what's their next target? Is there going to be a second Hiroshima or Nagasaki? So now the American public are on pins and needles, right? Because they don't know what this is. This is the first time they've seen a satellite. They have no idea, right? So now the American public is very fearful about what may happen. On the other side of the coin, in the Soviet Union, Stalin is gone. He has passed. And now there is a new leader that emerged in the Soviet Union in 1955. And his name is Nikita Khrushchev, right? And because of his influence in communism and so forth, he tried to take advantage of the Americans' concern over missiles with the problem with West Berlin, right? Many East Germans were tired of their treatment from the Soviet Union, okay? Very tired of their treatment. They were not, remember again, the Soviet Union was not economically stable as they were before. So they were not able to directly provide as much as they could for Eastern Germany and East Berlin. So many East Germans, or those that lived on the communist side, those that were influenced by the Soviet Union, they were fleeing to West Berlin. And the western side, that was governed by the Allied powers, right? Great Britain, France, United States. Nikita Khrushchev was like, we don't like that. We don't like that at all. And especially the tension that was happening between them and the United States. They're like, we definitely don't like this. So he decides in 1961 to build this massive wall separating West Germany and East Germany. Okay? So that no East Germans could run to West Germany. He was literally boxing them into their own area or their own part of the city. And now that is called the Berlin Wall. And the Berlin Wall becomes this big symbol of tension and division between the United States and the Soviet Union. And it's so distinctive, and it's such a massive wall, and it's so powerful that Winston Churchill of Great Britain, he coined the term the Iron Curtain, and he describes it as this major division between the Soviet Union and the United States, right? And that is going to bring us to even more tension, which we'll talk about later, in terms of how close the tension really became between the United States and the Soviet Union. Guys, it came super close. I can't even begin to tell you how close it was. It was majorly close, but you'll find that out later in the next video. But before we get to that, let's talk about these key terms, because you may hear it come up again as we get into new topics or new talks about the Cold War. A satellite state, containment. Containment was that U.S. policy to make sure that communism stayed in its place and not moved to other areas that they were interested in. And then, of course, we talked about deterrence, holding arsenals of nuclear weapons just to make sure that they prevented an all-out nuclear war, right? And let's apply it. This is a pamphlet from the Catholic Library Service in the United States from 1938. It's called How Communism Works. You're going to use TACOs, which is time, action, caption, objects, and summary, to analyze this pamphlet to find out what does it mean. Okay, I can tell you that it is a part of propaganda, yes. So take that for its purposes and go ahead and analyze this particular pamphlet. I will see you in the next video, and have a good one.